no matter where you sit as a lawyer, seeing your client as a partner, I think, is the best way to become a trusted advisor. And that requires understanding the business, understanding the levers, understanding the pressures, and all the different things that are sort of leading to the legal question. And that has forced, I think, the lawyers to think differently about the way we provide legal advice. So it's less about, I did a memo, I did some research, and here are the possibilities. This is, of course we've done the research. Of course we understand the context for the question. And here are the business options that you have based on the state of the law or where we can go with it. And I do think that's been a shift that I've seen.
Welcome to another episode of On Record PR. I'm the executive producer and guest host, Jennifer Simpson Carr. Today, I'm going on record with Leander Dolphin, managing partner of Shipman Goodwin. As managing partner, Leander leads the strategic direction of the firm, which is comprised of more than 140 lawyers in Connecticut and New York. In her practice, Leander has dedicated her career to advising educational institutions and organizations that foster the development of children, youth, and young adults, including having served as the Vice President of Human Resources and General Counsel for the Girl Scouts of Connecticut. Welcome, Leander.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Nice to see you again, and thanks for inviting me on.
Thank you so much for joining me. The last time that we were together was during Marketing Partner Forum in beautiful Amelia Island. And you participated in a fantastic plenary session that really focused on the relationship perspectives of general counsel and their outside legal partners, private practice attorneys. It had a wonderful mix of law firm, private practice attorneys, and general counsel. So I'd love it if you could give our listeners just a quick summary of what the kind of overarching theme was for that session.
Sure. It's unbelievable, but it's been several months now, so I'm trying to remember. But the overarching theme was a discussion about how the relationship between in-house counsel and private law firms have changed over years, what has been good, what are the challenges, and sort of where we think the relationship will continue to go and where it will evolve over time. We also talked a little bit about AI and how that might impact sort of the practice of law in general. So, it was really good to have different perspectives, from other law firm management partners, as well as a number of general counsel.
Yeah, it was a really well-received session. I know that I, as well as the entire group around me, were taking diligent notes. And you set the stage, and you just mentioned it briefly, but you set the stage by discussing how the perspective of in-house counsel has shifted over the past 20 to 25 years. Can you talk a little bit more about that shift you have seen?
Yeah, so this is my 20th year of practice. So I feel like I'm right in the middle of this sort of generational shift that happened and has been happening. When I first started practicing, the approach was that in-house counsel was sort of a way station that you would go to after you maybe tried the law firm for a little bit. It was billed as a place where you could have a good quality of life and, all these as an alternative to private law practice. But there did not appear to be, at least from a young and a junior lawyer perspective, lots of room for growth, very few opportunities to become sort of a leader, and even to become general counsel. I have seen a big shift over the years in that in-house counsel are truly subject matter experts. They have to be in their particular industry and their businesses. And I have seen that, I don't want to suggest that it wasn't professional before, but it's more of a professionalized role as counsel. And when I talk to in-house counsel now, whether those are my clients or peers and friends who are working in-house in leadership or up through the general counsel role, they talk about their business as executives and they provide legal advice as executives. And I think that has been a shift, at least something I have seen. And I think that because there's been this shift, I do think that the businesses are treating their in-house counsel as a business-related role. I think they are paying them as such. I don't think those roles are the typical quality of life roles that we were thinking of 20 years ago. A lot of my colleagues and friends are working just as hard in-house as they were and as long as they are doing a private firm. So I have seen a shift there, and I feel like the stakes seem higher for in-house counsel now than it did before.
It's a really positive shift that you've described. And I definitely heard from the panel that they view one another as a true business partner.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's no matter where you sit as a lawyer, seeing your client as a partner, I think, is the best way to become a trusted advisor. And that requires understanding the business, understanding the levers, understanding the pressures, and all the different things that are sort of leading to the legal question. And that has forced, I think, the lawyers to think differently about the way we provide legal advice. So it's less about, I did a memo, I did some research, and here are the possibilities. This is, of course we've done the research. Of course we understand the context for the question. And here are the business options that you have based on the state of the law or where we can go with it. And I do think that's been a shift that I've seen.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic explanation of really the components that create a successful client relationship. So as a leader of Shipman and Goodwin, how do you train your lawyers to take a client-first approach?
Well, I tell them just directly that we are only in business because of our clients and for the of our clients and in service for our clients. A lot of people come into private practice, starting as a junior lawyer. They're not sure what they want to do. They're looking for purpose. They're looking for a way to sort of get fulfillment. And I don't know that private practice is usually the place that people are thinking that they can get that sense of personal fulfillment and a service-driven life. And I have found that the lawyers who are the most successful are the ones who approach it with a service-forward, client-centric approach. Because if everything you're doing is about how to help the client, how to serve the client, it does give you, I think, a little bit more of a purpose. It's not just counting widgets or billing hours, right? You're doing the thing and whatever it is that you need to do to help your client achieve their goals. So we talk about it in those terms with our junior lawyers and up through our partners. When we talk about succession planning, we talk about the fact that what does the client need? What will the client need from me and my team of lawyers or the people who are coming behind me? And I think if you start there, you usually get closer to the answer. It requires not only understanding your client's business, but asking the right questions, listening a lot. And instead of having a sort of me approach, I know everything about the law, I know the answer. If you started from what the client needs are, I think you get to a better result for your client. I think that leads to successful relationships. When we do pitches, for example, we're responding to an RFP or we're going out to make a pitch for new work, make sure that we have diverse teams of people, including more junior lawyers, so that they can see sort of what it means to be in that moment where the client is looking at us as a service provider and what types of questions they're asking. What are they looking for from us? I think that helped me shape how I think about what my job was when I went to a number of those pitches when I was more of a junior lawyer. And I remember I went to one maybe early on in my career, and one of my partners, who really is like the elder and the person who started our school, our practice at Shipman, he said to the client in response to a question, one of the things that distinguishes us is that we are going to be available to you. Whenever you call, we want to be there to be available to you. So that means it's 24/7. And I remember sort of blanching a little bit. And I was like, oh my God, are we supposed to be available 24/7? Is that what I signed up for? And what I saw in that approach was having the client see that we were in the trenches with them. So if the news was going to show up at the school or the college, that they can call us. And if that was happening at 11 p.m. at night, that they could call us 11 p.m. at night. Or if that was happening on a Saturday, that they could do that. And that taught me something really sort of crucial about how you get a client to trust you, right? And obviously that affects the way we work as well. And certainly I think clients think of emergencies differently than others might. So something that they think is an emergency that warrants an 11 p.m. email or call isn't necessarily something that we all would think. But the important part is that they know that we are going to be looking to help them when they think they're in an emergency so that we can sort of help them throughout it. So I hope that answers your question.
It absolutely does. And I think you bring up a really great perspective, which is it's easy for us to jump in, in I guess our heads and try to validate whether or not it's an emergency. But the perspective of saying this feels like an emergency to the client, and I respect that, I am certain goes a long way with your clients.
It does. And, sometimes I will tell you, I've asked, if I'm on vacation and I get a call from a client, I do ask, tell me what's going on. And do you feel like this is an emergency? Because that gives the client the sort of agency to decide. I'm calling because I want to talk to you and I need your help. If it's an emergency, I need to talk to you now, which means I'm going to leave wherever I am to find my way to get to you, to help and get you what you need. If it isn't an emergency and it's something that is still necessary and you need, but we can spend time talking, adjust my approach. I will respond differently in a crisis than I will in something that is maybe, pressing, but not as urgent as there's a child, who's been this school shooting, for example, or something that's really emergent.
Of course. So I had mentioned in the intro that you served as general counsel. And yes. I'm curious, what was your expectation and what led to really great relationships with your outside counsel when you sat in that role of GC?
Oh my gosh. First of all, I was terrified all the time as a general counsel because there is a very steep learning curve, right? And my training before I went in-house was as an employment lawyer and as a litigator. And I had certainly given advice to lots of clients about things like a layoff or a termination or a reduction in force, right? And so I was very comfortable giving that advice. Being inside the organization and actually executing on that was very different and gave me really clear perspective about the difference between giving advice and implementing the advice that your lawyers have given you. And that was really eye-opening to me. I think learning more about business in general, how to be an executive, the kinds of things that a CEO is thinking about as she, and that my CEO then was a woman, making decisions, that was really helpful to me, right? So I remember one of the things that came up was Girl Scouts have lots of property, thousands and thousands of acres. And of course, that meant some people, especially the utilities, would be interested in using the land for like a cell phone tower. And I was an employment lawyer, so I did not know anything at all about cell phone tower leases. So I needed to get up to speed. I needed to reach out to a trusted advisor who could do that, right? I needed to learn enough so I could be helpful in communicating to our lawyer what we needed, right? And what my CEO had asked for and to get advice. So what I was looking for was someone who was going to explain it to me pretty quickly with not a lot of jargon, right? I'm an employment lawyer, but I need to understand very quickly cell phone tower leases, what we should be concerned about, what are the pitfalls. I needed that very, very quickly and in a way that I could understand it and then turn it around and tell my CEO, right, who trusted me to get the answers on that. And I remember getting the answers from, then our counsel and then talking to our CEO, and she pushed back and said, I would like X, Y, and Z, right? And I remember taking a big gulp because what she was asking, I thought we couldn't get, right? She wanted more money or whatever it was. And I was like, I don't know that we can do that. But that was a good experience for me, right? So I have an issue that was new to me, that was important to my client, because that's the organization and the CEO. The CEO doesn't really care about the law and how just wants to make sure that it gets done and she wants the best deal. And then I had to talk to the lawyer who, needed to understand that I didn't have like an unlimited budget because I had a very small legal outside counsel budget. I needed him to explain it very quickly and easily. And then I needed to understand sort of how to apply it in the business context to meet my CEO's goals. So I felt that what was helpful there was having a lawyer on the outside who could get me up to speed as quickly as possible. And I remember I called him back and said, my CEO wants to do X, Y, and Z. And he said, well, it's going to be tough, but I'll see what I can do. That was also a good lesson to me, right? In sort of acknowledging that sometimes the client is asking for something that you wouldn't expect and that it's still your job to try to go get to the best result. And he did that. So I learned a lot about being the client and being the general counsel to the client and being a business, like all of those It's a very small example, but really gave me a lot of insight so that when I went back to the firm, I went back to Shipman, I was a better lawyer because of that experience.
That's a fantastic story and is certainly demonstrative of all of the components that general counsel face every day. And I also think I appreciated you saying, I don't remember the word that you used, but nervous or scared in that role, because I think we oftentimes look at GCs and think they all have it figured out. But at the end of the day, we're all human and we have the background and experiences we have to share. So thank you for sharing.
And I did learn a lot of general counsel. I mean, it's called general counsel, so it's a little bit of a misnomer, right? You think that because you're general counsel, the person knows a lot about a lot. When the answer is, it's impossible to be sort of, a master of all, right? So knowing what your strengths are and being able to identify when you need help from someone who's an outside expert on a particular area of the law, that's important. But I do think the general counsel have to be experts in their business, which is different than being a private practice lawyer who are experts in their particular subject matter area, right? So it's a different shift. So I mean, obviously, you're general counsel, you're a smart person who can think about a lot and carry a lot, but there's a lot of not knowing. And this is something I'd add. The thing I learned in-house was sometimes a good enough answer was good for the business, not necessarily the one that was going to be the perfect legal solution or this is the only way it can get done. I learned that really sometimes the business judgment, right, which is always the client's call, is less perfect than the legal answer might be.
And that's a challenge in its own, is balancing the two, I'm sure. So we're going to pause here for just a moment to hear a message from our sponsor. And when we get back, we're going to take a look ahead at what you predict in terms of the relationships between private practice and general counsel.
This episode is brought to you by Furia Rubel Communications, a public relations and marketing agency serving law firms and businesses internationally. With an expert team of professionals positioned throughout the U.S. and supported by international affiliates, Furia Rubel enhances its clients' brands through integrated communications by providing expert guidance in crisis management and high-profile litigation, protecting brand and reputation, and supporting internal marketing teams with media relations, media and crisis training, and client and talent acquisition and retention. To learn more, visit furiarubel.com.
So, Leander, we're back from our sponsor message, and I'd love to know, looking ahead, down the road, as far as you'd like to imagine, what do you anticipate will be the evolving relationship between GCs, in-house counsel, and private practice attorneys and their outside counsel in the years to come?
I think that the relationships will continue to evolve to become more of a business role, right? As opposed to just being like you just calling someone for a legal answer. I think that, we get a lot of requests for secondments, for example. And I think that is something that businesses need, is they're looking for lawyers who can essentially serve as their in-house lawyers who, they don't need to go and do an entire search, right? They're not necessarily looking for a long-term solution. They're looking for someone who can be helpful in closing a gap inside their business, and having a lawyer with that skill set is very important. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And that necessarily means that I think that the lawyers are going to have to be, again, just better business people or business thinking, right? I think that I think AI and the advent of AI will change the relationship in terms of the expectations of what general counsel expect from their lawyers and what they're willing to pay for. We've already seen that shifting quite a bit with the outside counsel guidelines and how they manage or micromanage that, because it's a cost issue. But I do think that we'll continue to see more of a shift there in terms of how you're adding value and what the clients are willing to pay for in terms of what's legal advice and what is really sort of commodity advice, right? Or commodity legal work that they can do internally. I think they're going to come to us for more specialized, complicated issues than sort of the low-hanging fruit on things. I think what I've seen is that a lot of in-house counsels They're general counsel and chief legal officers. They're running their own law firms internally. And so I think that they will need us for things that their sort of in-house lawyers either don't have the bandwidth to do or don't have the experience to do and don't have enough time to get up to speed on a particular new area that someone on the outside, a law firm who does it for multiple clients, could bring to bear. So I don't know if that's a complete shift, but I think it's sort of a transition into more specialized use of lawyers outside.
So before we end our time together, I'm imagining our listeners, and many of them are practicing attorneys. And so for those listening to you who, is a leader in our industry, has been named Woman of the Year, Women to Watch, Lawyer of the Year, just in the past few years, because I did read through your credentials again before we got on the call. But hearing you today, and they're listening and thinking, how can I make decisions in my career to be positioned in a way where I can also be a leader one day in my firm or in my practice group? What advice would you give them?
I would say, thinking about my career, to say yes to certain opportunities that may seem maybe something you hadn't been thinking about in the past. I can honestly say I had not been thinking of myself as a leader of the law firm or any law firm. And when we were talking about who was going to lead the firm, I was not sure that it would be someone like me, right? I'm an education and employment lawyer. I mean, I have varied experience, and I think I could bring and actually have been able to bring a lot to bear to the role, but I hadn't considered it as something that was along the kind of options that I could do. So my advice would be to be open to say yes, even to those stretch opportunities, because going in-house was a stretch opportunity for me too. And as I said, I was terrified, but I was still a relatively junior lawyer when I got that role. And it allowed me to learn so much and to become a better lawyer. And I think did position me for doing the work that I'm doing now, right? Because there aren't as many private practice lawyers who have been both, right? That they've been both the client and general counsel and also an associate and partner at a private firm. And I think that perspective, I've been able to bring that to my role. And I hadn't considered it as something that was possible. So say yes, say no to things that do not serve you. And what I mean by that is really clear to kind of know what's important to you, what your values are, and not get distracted by what people think you should be doing at a particular time, or that there's a time frame for you to be doing specific things. I would just keep the focus on sort of what is serving you and your family at a particular time. And I think the rest will come.
That's beautifully stated. And thank you for that. Thank you again for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Please visit our website, onrecordpr.com. We always welcome your show ideas, guests, and topics at podcast@onrecord.com. And we'll see you next time. Leander, thank you so much again.
Thanks again for having me, Jennifer. See you soon.
Bye.
On Record PR is produced by Jennifer Simpson Carr and Matt Henderson, with support from the team at Furia Rubel Communications. This episode is edited by Željko Tomic of Compost Media Flow.